Hey YouTube, Mike the Alpha Hoarder here. Today I wanted to talk a little bit about Collector's Edition and International Edition. This comes up a lot in my comments section, in emails. People always want to know what I think of CE and IE. Are they undervalued? What's their upside potential? This sort of thing. So I gave it a little bit of thought and I figured we could chat about it. So first things first, what is this product? So this is how it looked. This is the International Edition. There was a Collector's Edition and an International Edition. And it was released in 1993 for $50. And it was produced in response to customer demand. And as I understand it, it was highly unpopular within Wizards of the Coast. Richard Garfield apparently hated this product. And what the cards are basically a clone of the beta print run, but with the special gold back, square corners. But all of the registers and fonts and spacings are exactly identical to beta. The back surface is glossier. And this contains the complete set, plus a bunch of lands. So, because it was so unpopular, they kept the print run really tight. So they ordered 10,000 of the Collector's Edition, and then a further 5,000 of International Edition. But apparently Cartamundi shorted them a bit on the domestic stuff, so they ended up with a little over 9,000 collectors, and they actually ended up selling 1,500 of the International Editions domestically to try to fix that problem. So point being, there is between 14 and 15,000 total of these between the international and collectors combined. And it's the first and last time a product like that went to market. Now, there are no commons or uncommons or rares. The only distinction here is basic lands and non-basic lands. And as I said, there are a little under 15,000 of each non-basic land in IE and CE together. Oh, cool. So back to the question. What do I think of CE and IE? Are they undervalued? What's their upside potential? Oh, this is cool. Have you seen this before? It is a poker deck printed by Cartamundi using the official Magic back. That's fun. All right, so a little bit of the usual throat clearing. Are these things undervalued? I have no idea. I did some digging. I did a little thinking. I enjoy sharing that with you guys. And, you know, as always, the things that I say should just be input into your own calculations. Not the final word, not some authority, not an investment recommendation. What the hell do I know? And then I suppose as a transparency disclosure, I do not have a large position beyond what you're seeing right here. This is essentially my position. I do have a handful of playable rares, non-power, non-dual. Oh, very nice. As a pure speculation. You know, just in case the normal print runs someday price people out, there might be a push for players into the collector or International Edition. So I got a very small position in that, but I'm not actively adding to it. All right, so let's just take a look at what this is. So what do I think of international collectors? Well, first, talk about sealed. Take a look at the product. This is how it's shipped. Now this one, the inner seal is intact, as you can see. Had you bought this back in the 90s, there would be an outer seal as well. Sometimes you can get them fully sealed. It's a little bit easier to get them with just the inner seal. And then they came in these sort of bricks of the different cards. Let's see, where's the good one? Here it is. Here's the good one. So I think people already know the corners are notoriously hard to keep in good condition. And the gold comes off super easy. But one thing to note is the centering can really make or break this product if you're considering, say, grading it. Let's see. I think this one's decent, but yeah, this one's decent, but a lot of them are just not good. You can very easily get a whole box of 8s or 8.5s just because the centering can be off. So keep that in mind. But anyway, every single of a collector edition or international edition card on the market represents a box that was opened, right? And with an estimated print run of 15K combined, there's just not much out there. Because international edition is half the print run of collector's edition, that creates a slight demand preference for international edition from collectors. But as far as I've seen, players don't seem to care about that distinction. So I took a sample of a random card, Living Artifact. I looked at Card Market, Card Kingdom, TCG Player, all the big places, the graded population, and I was able to find 246 copies that are on the market right now. So at this particular moment, 30 years after the product came out, 1.5% of the boxes are confirmed opened just from that one card alone. And so that should just indicate how rare any form of sealed is going to be for this thing. And so that's why I feel really good about the sealed. This is an investment, and as an investment, I love it. But, most people are priced out on this. And so the second thing is the singles. Let me just take a look at this guy, and then we can talk about singles. I'm hoping this one is really clean, except for the centering, but let's see what we got. Ooh. Oh yeah, very clean. Love it when that happens. Print dot. Oh wow. Were not for the centering, this thing is gradable. All right. So now we can talk about singles. Sleeved play and the price of the originals has really transitioned this product from a purely collector's product into a player's and collector's product. And obviously that transition increased the demand, as it would have to. But the real question is this already priced into the market? Oh, cool. is this already priced into the market, or are there opportunities? I've done business with this guy a couple times. Solid dude, and he's got some cool stuff. He plays Alpha 40. He's got a lot of this sort of thing. Really neat cards. Okay, so I made some graphs. In case you don't like graphs, I guess I'll keep feeding the horde. I'll try to do it down on the bottom half of the screen so you can see what I'm talking about up top. But what I want to do is look at each of the 10 duels and then draw a few conclusions at the end. And I'm comparing the Collector's Edition duels specifically, just because the data for Collector's Edition is a little bit better, higher print run. And I'm comparing it to Revised Edition duels. And I'm using duels because they are the most liquid, the most popular. There is already the best overlap of players and collectors. So it seems to me that's a great benchmark / predictor for comparing those two sets and sort of their collectible, playable value at present and down the road. And so first up, let's take a look at Badlands. Now, apologies for the distortion. You see these sort of double icons and stuff. If you try to reproduce this yourself, I'm pulling these off MTG stocks, you'll notice pretty quickly when you put the images side by side that for whatever reason the x-axis doesn't always line up. So I had to do a little bit of stretching to make sure that we were actually comparing on the same grid, the same coordinate grid. And then likewise I had to scale on the y-axis, because it'll fit the price of the card you're looking at, but I wanted to be able to compare two cards. So the distortions should not affect the actual data points. It's just to make them overlay properly. So anyway, take a look at Badlands. You can see at the start of Q2 in 2017, the Collector's Edition Badlands would cost you about $48. Revised would cost you $108. Fast forward to mid Q3 2022, we've got $368 for the Collector's Edition and $442 for the Revised Edition. So that's an overall growth of 760 some percent for collectors and 409% for Revised Edition. Wow, cool. And the other thing I was interested in looking at was in 2017, a collector's edition was 44% of the price of a revised edition. Today is 83% of that price. So there was an 88% increase in relative value. I'm going to run through this number on each of the cards so that we can see the pattern, but a friendly reminder, past performance does not predict future performance, and I think that's especially true in this case. For sure, collector's edition cards were underappreciated in the past. And so the fact that there's an outperformance against revised, it makes perfect sense as that was correcting. And so once again, the question is it still underappreciated? Not was it historically underappreciated? So anyway, back to the graph here. If you look at when the price moves between the two editions, oh yeah, with the tape. All right. If you look at when the price moves between the two editions, you'll see that there isn't really much of a lag when there's a big price spike. And maybe there's a 2-week lag on the slower moves. And you can see that it's a little bit hard to tease that data out, from the picture. So I'm doing my best, but use your own judgment. The lines at the bottom there are 6-month intervals, so you have to sort of divide that in your head. But you get the idea. We're just looking for patterns here, so absolute precision isn't necessary. And then the other thing I want to point out is that the prices came very near to parity in Q1 of 2020. All right, Bayou. In 2017, we've got a collector's edition costing $87, revised $179. That increases to $418 in 2022 versus $525. So we had 480% growth versus 293% growth. Or that ratio of collectors to revised went from being 48% of the price to 79%. So 64% increase in the relative value. And for this card, I'm seeing about a 2-week lag in price spikes between when one moves and the other responds. Revised moving and collector's edition responding. And then we see a price parity. Once again, this one's a little bit earlier. Q3 of 2018, and it holds until second quarter of 2019. Plateau. I hope this isn't boring. There is some interesting points to draw at the end, but it is necessary to walk through the numbers first, so apologies. In 2017, collector's editions were selling for $41, revised for $65. And in 2022, those same two numbers are $281 versus $350. I'm having just a terrible time with these cards down here. Taped with packaging tape over the top and no pull tab. So that's a price growth on the collector's edition of 685% versus only 538% on revised edition. Once more, the ratio, collector's editions went from costing 63% of the cost of a revised up to 80%. 27% increase in relative value. I see a 2 to 4 week lag in price spikes, collector's edition lagging, and then I see a price parity somewhere around Q2 of 2019 and holding until about Q2 of 2020. So approximately a year testing that parity. Beautiful jump. If you're watching the bottom of the screen, a lot of these cards are in great condition. Always makes my day. All right, we got Scrubland. This one is an anomaly at the average, the darker lines, although the market seems correct, but I stuck with average for everything. So anyway, 2017, we got $44 for a collector's edition. It's already open, all right. And $80 for revised, versus today, $395 to $368. So today, the collector's, at the time I'm pulling this data anyway, the collector's edition is actually showing a higher average. But anyway, that's a growth of 897% for collectors versus 460% for revised. Ooh, beautiful plague rats. And collector's edition went from being 55% of the cost to being 107% of the cost, which is a 94% increase in relative value. I'm seeing 1 to 3 month lag in price spikes and a price parity tested between Q2 of 2018 and the end of quarter 1 in 2020. Savannah. $58 versus $83. Fast forward to $325 versus $371. That's a growth of 560% versus 446%. Or relative price 70% up to 87%. 24% increase in relative value. For this card, I see looks like maybe a 6-week lag in the price spikes. And this has some early spikes like we saw in Plateau and in Scrubland in July of 2018. Not sure exactly what caused this. Clearly the set was being tested, perhaps a buyout. It did not support the price. Timeout on my graph. Is this guy beta? I have to pull him out and see. Might have a beta card here. All right. And then here too, we see the prices reaching near parity pretty much from the third quarter in 2018 until late Q1 of 2020. Look at that. A frozen shade in beta has slipped in as an alpha. I will have to reach out and let this guy know. Well, it's a nice beta anyway. This is a solid seller. I don't expect a problem. Tega. $55 versus $81 increases to $253 versus $408. So collector's edition has a growth of 460%. Revised edition has 503%. So in this case, there's actually a decrease in relative value. I also don't really see any lag in the price spikes. And here too, we're holding parity in pricing from second quarter of 2018 through Q1 of 2020. Next up, we've got Tropical Island. $54 versus $219 back in 2017. And today we've got $253 versus $620. So collector's edition saw 468% growth. Revised saw 283% growth. Ratio went from 23% of the value up to 41% of the value. That's a 78% increase. I don't see any lag in the price spikes between the two editions. And I see a price parity around Q3 of 2018 and holding until first quarter of 2020. All right, a couple more. Bear with me, and then we can wrap this up. Tundra. $75 versus $189, whereas today we're at $400 versus $596. So that's a growth of 533% for collector's edition versus 315% for revised edition. 71% increase in the relative value, minimal lag in the spikes, and we've got price parity from the end of 2018 into Q2 of 2020. Underground C. Okay, Underground C. $160 versus $343 in 2017 versus $766 to $898 today. That better be on the sleeve. Collector's edition saw 478% growth during that time versus 261% from revised edition. 87% increase in the relative price between collectors and revised. 3-week lag in the spikes, in the price spikes between the editions. And for this card, parity is never tested between the prices, although you can see it's under $100 difference pretty much from Q2 2019 all the way to Q2 2020. So it's close to a test, but not quite what the other cards were doing. And then lastly, we've got Volcanic Island. I'm just running through this because this has got to be boring. 190 versus 390 in 2017, and today we've got 688 versus 781. Collector's edition appreciated by 362% versus only 200% revised. 79% increase in the relative value, less than a month lag in price spikes, and a price parity from late 2018 through the second quarter of 2020. Okay, so let me now draw your attention to a couple of things that just went by there. As soon as I finish looking at these cards, really clean set here. It is a rare pleasure to get a bunch of alpha cards that look this nice. The edges, the surface, you just don't see it too often anymore. All right, very nice. Beautiful take today, for sure. Okay. So there's a couple things that are worth noting from all those graphs we just ran through. First of all, the prices drift in a pretty close lockstep. They are obviously correlated. But when you look at the dramatic moves, they almost always appear in revised first. And then the lag is sometimes a couple weeks, but often almost no lag. At least as far as I can tell from this pretty low resolution data. And Collector's Edition follows. Now, historically, Collector's Edition saw much better growth. If you average all those numbers I was spitting out, revised grew by 344% from that sort of July 2017 to today, whereas Collector's Edition grew by 523%. Now, as I said before, that could represent a correction after the shift of players into the market, rather than a sort of intrinsic trajectory. So now take a look at this graph. What I did here is take all 10 of those dual lands and then I overlaid them. And I normalized the charts so that this, what I was calling this parity test period, overlaps on the y-axis. So this isn't an accurate representation of the relative prices. The dates on the bottom are accurate. What I'm trying to do instead is sort of show a price convergence here. And so you can see how the prices, they tested high, spiking early on. Then they quickly converge. And there's this interesting period where they track with revised edition. This convergence holds for a while, but then it's pretty decisively diverges. So Collector's Edition saw this dramatic price test in mid-2018. And that seems to me a time that the market was shaking out what the value of these cards should be. The spikes were widespread, but they just vanished very quickly. And then after this, the market tests this pricing phase where they're basically the same. Variously as early as late 2018, but more widely from the second half of 2019 through the first half of 2020, which it's fairly long as these things go. And then you can kind of see where the pandemic boom happens, well, the sort of pandemic crash followed by the boom. But ultimately, this price parity is rejected. The prices separate, revised moves up and holds up. And now, 18 months later, we have never equalized back to that parity. So, what I'm reading from that, Collector's Edition appears to represent a floor for revised. Revised won't drop below it. Instead, it'll sort of crash into it and they'll both get pushed down during a bear market. And then they'll separate again during a bull market. Or to look at it from the other way, revised represents a ceiling. We see these spikes, maybe that was a buyout in 2018. In that case, this is violated, but that's pretty quickly rejected. And otherwise, we see revised behaving like a ceiling. So this implies that the Collector's Edition is a derivative asset. It is bounded between 0 and the price of revised. So that means to me, likely, the maximum upside at any time is the spread between the Collector's Edition and the revised edition. So today, if you average the duals, the average spread between the average price of the Collector's Edition duals compared to the average price of the revised edition duals is $121 or 22%. And so that strikes me as the maximum upside today on Collector's Edition. Whereas Revised has no theoretical ceiling until you're getting to the prices of the unlimited cards. Now, that doesn't mean Revised outperforms Collectors in any given window. You know, that's not what these patterns show. That will vary as the Collector's Edition increases or decreases that spread. But the useful bit out of this, I think, is that the Collector's Edition gives you a more controlled risk, or perhaps a more predictable risk. If Revised Edition crashes, there is that sort of cushion, that spread, which can absorb some of the market movement. It means the Collector's Edition won't necessarily crash as much percentage-wise. It may not crash as soon, it may not crash at all. On the flip side, if Revised booms, the Collector's Edition doesn't have to boom at the same rate. So, you know, when you decrease your risk, you also tend to decrease your reward, and that's kind of what I think I'm seeing here. I'm seeing a slightly risk-controlled version of Revised Edition, but a possibly less liquid version. So lastly, because there's a lower print run on these cards, you'd expect to see a little bit more volatility, hence some of these dramatic price spikes, but it does always reset. On the whole, the liquidity of dual lands just means that spikes like that aren't going to hold too well. But you know, it kind of makes sense. If the major shift in this market has been the entry of players, then if the price of Collector's Edition did try to push its way above Revised, people would just buy the Revised instead. You know, why pay more? What is this? I don't think these are my cards. It happens now and then. I get people send me the wrong order. Someone somewhere ends up with alpha cards. Yeah, this is not mine. I don't know what this is. Nice and shiny. Okay. Gotta figure out what to do with those. Yeah, so as an aside, I'm not sure buyouts would be a wise decision in the CE or IE space. Doesn't seem like it's going to work out. Your collector base would really be your only liquidity pool, because players will just sidestep over to Revised. So, in conclusion, all that makes me suspect that the duels are not underappreciated, and player demand is already priced in. Now, that does not mean they don't still have potential, but their potential is bounded by the trajectory of Revised. So I guess if you want to break that out a bit, the best case scenario is that the Collector's Edition appreciates with Revised and closes the spread, in which case you would see Collector's Edition outperform Revised by, from today's numbers, 22%. Worst case scenario, everything goes to zero. The current trend, it will track with Revised with a gradually widening spread. That's what we have seen since the cards separated from this parity test. A widening spread, and thus an underperformance against Revised Edition. Now, what about other cards? All that conversation was based on the dual lands. I don't see why any other cards would be different. The variable is really only if or when players will or have entered those markets the way they did for the duels. That's going to depend on the playability of the card, the desirability of the specific card. It depends on the pricing of the standard edition cards. So if a card is super playable and it becomes very expensive in Revised, and players aren't already in the collector's edition market, I would expect to see something happen there. What would I expect to see happen? Well, the same thing that we're seeing with the dual lands. So, as I said in the beginning, I think the dual lands are a good sort of benchmark or predictor of what to expect out of the collector's edition set in general, and the international edition. I don't see the players making the distinction between the two. Collectors will tend to, because of the print run difference. It's hard to ignore that if you're a collector. If you're a player, I don't think it matters which of the two backs are on here. You're already wandering into a tournament legal card. So, you know, doesn't matter. You just want the card. So that's my 2 cents on the matter. Just to close it back to where I started, none of this is investment advice, of course, nor is it a full accounting of all the variables. But hopefully some of it is useful as you yourself are weighing the situation. And, you know, if there's important things I missed, let me know in the comments. I sort of came at this from one specific angle. But, you know, there's plenty of other ways to break it apart. I've said before, I often wish these monologues could be dialogues, you know, and I try to do that a bit in the comments, but it is a little bit hard to have a dialogue when I'm alone in the basement at 2 in the morning. So, anyway. Yeah, that's my rant. I think for the major cards, for the major singles, I suspect the shift in the player market is already priced in. So I don't necessarily think that there is unrealized opportunity sitting there. I do still think there is opportunity there. I think your risk is actually a little bit lower. I think I could say that. I need to think that through a little bit more, but it seems to me your risk might be a little lower. And I think the sealed is a wonderful thing if you can get a hold of it. It's very hard to do. And the Hoard is in great shape today, with this one little exception. So as always, thanks for joining me, and I look forward to continuing the conversation down in the comments. Thanks for watching today's video. If you're enjoying my content and you want to see even more, then don't forget to visit your ophthalmologist once per year, or at least once every 2 years. See you next time.